The capitulation was demanded and refused on the 24th May, and the Sultan gave orders for the general assault on the 29th. He announced to his army that all the plunder of the city should be theirs, and that he only reserved the land and the buildings. The Ottoman soldiers received the announcement with shouts of joy. The chiefs of the Janissaries pledged themselves that victory was certain, and a general elimination of the Turkish camp and fleet at night showed to the besieged the number, the purpose, and the exulting confidence of their foes. Within its city, the Greek population passed alternately from the terror at the coming storm to turbulent confidence in certain superstitious legends which promised the help of saints and angels to men who would not help themselves. Only a small proportion of his subjects listened to the expostulations and entreaties by which their noble-minded emperor urged them to deserve the further favor of heaven by using to the utmost those resources which heaven had already placed in their hands. Even among those who bore arms as part of the garrison, the meanest jealousy of their Latin auxiliaries prevailed. On the very eve of the final assault, when Giustiniani, who was charged with the defense of the great breach, required some additional guns, the Grand Duke Notaras, who had the general control of the ordnance, refused the supply, saying that it was unnecessary. The Latins did their duty nobly. Of the 12 chief posts in the defense, 10 were held by them. Giustiniani, in particular, distinguished himself by his valor and skill. He formed new works in rear of the demolished towers and gate of the Sanct Romanus, and exported the admiration of the Sultan, who watched his preparations and exclaimed, "What would I not give to gain that man to my service?" But the chief hero of the defense was Constantine himself. He knew that his hour was come, and prepared to die in the discharge of duty, with the earnest piety of a true Christian and the calm courage of a brave soldier. On the night before the assault, he received the Holy Sacrament in the Church of St. Sophia. He then proceeded to the great palace and lingered for a short time in the halls, where his predecessors had reigned for so many centuries, but which neither he nor any prince sprung from his race was ever to see again. When he had passed forth from the palace to take his station at the great bridge, and there await his martyrdom, all thoughts of earthly grandeur were forgotten and turning to those around him, many of whom had been his companions from youth. Constantine asked of them, as fellow Christians, their forgiveness for any offense that he had ever committed towards them. Amid the tears and prayers of all who beheld him, the last of the Caesars then went forth to die. In the Ottoman camp, all, all was ready for the work of death. Each column had its specified point of attack, and the Sultan had so arranged the vast masses of men at his command that he was prepared to send fresh troops successively forward against the city, even if its defenders were to hold their ground against him from daybreak to noon. At sunrise on the 29th May 1435, 1453, the Turkish drums and trumpets sounded for the assault, and the leading divisions of the Sultan's army rushed forward, prodigal of lives, and reckoning upon wearing down the resistance of the garrison by sending wave upon wave of stormers against them. Mahomet placed his least valued soldiers in the van to receive the first steady volley of the Greek guns and dull the edge of the Christian sword. The better troops were to follow. The main body of the Janissaries, under the Sultan's own eye, was to assault the principal breach. Detachments of those chosen warriors were also directed against other weakened points of the defense. At the same time that the attack commenced from the camp, the Turkish flotilla moved against the fortifications along the harbor, and the assault soon raged by sea and by land along two sides of the Greek city. For 2 hours the Christians resisted skillfully and steadily, and taught the Sultan in person by promises, by threats, and by blows, urged his columns forward to the great bridge. Neither there nor elsewhere along the line could they bear back the stubborn courage of the defenders, nor could a living Mahometan come into Constantinople. At last Justiniani, who, side by side with the emperor, conducted the defense of the great bridge, received a severe wound and left his post to die on board his galley in the harbor. The garrison was dispirited at the loss, and the chief of the assailing emissaries, observing that the resistance had slackened, redoubled their efforts to force a passage. One of them, named Hassan of Ulubat, conspicuous by his stature and daring, rushed the 30 comrades up the barricade ruins of one of the overthrown towers that flanked the breach. They gained the summit and saw Hassan and 18 of his forlorn hope were struck down. Others rapidly followed, and carried the Greek defences by the overwhelming weight of their numbers. Nearly at the same time, another Ottoman corps effected an entrance at the slightly protected part of the long line of walls and, wheeling round, took the garrison in the rear. Constantine saw now that all was lost with safe honor, and exclaiming, "I would rather die than live." The last of the Romans rushed amid the advancing foe, and fell stretched by two sabre wounds among the undistinguished dead. Torrent after torrent of the conquerors now raged through the captured city. At first they slew all whom they met or overtook, but when they found that all resistance had ceased, the love of plunder predominated over the thirst for blood, and they strove to secure the fairest and strongest of the helpless thousands that cowered before them, for service or for sale as slaves. About the hour of noon, Sultan Mohammed, surrounded by his viziers, his pashas, and his guards, rode through the breach at the gate of the Romans into the city which he had conquered. He alighted at the church of St. Sophia, and entering the splendid edifice, he ordered one of the muezzins who accompanied him to summon the true believers to prayer. He then himself mounted the high altar and prayed. Having thus solemnly established the creed of the Prophet in the shrine where his fallen adversary had on the preceding eve celebrated the holiest Christian rite, and where so many generations of Christians had worshipped, Mohammed ordered search of the made for Christian's body. It was found under a heap of slain in the great breach, and was identified beyond all possibility of dispute by the golden eagles that were embroidered upon the emperor's buskins. The head was cut off and exhibited for a time between the feet of the bronze horses of the equestrian statue of Justinian, in the place called the Augustan. The ghastly trophy of Muhammad's conquest was subsequently embalmed and sent round to the chief cities of Asia. The greater number of the imperious Latin auxiliaries had shared his noble deed. Some few had made their way to the harbour and escaped through the Ottoman fleet. Others came as captives into Muhammad's power, and were either put to death or required to pay heavy ransoms. The Genoese inhabitants of the suburb of Galata obtained terms of capitulation by which they were protected from pillage. The Grand Duke Notaras was brought prisoner before Muhammad, who made a show of treating him with favor, and obtained from him a list of principal Greek dignitaries and officers of state. The Sultan instantly proclaimed their names of his soldiers and offered 1,000 squins of each of their heads. On the day after the capture of the city, Muhammad continued his survey of his conquest and took possession of the imperial palace. Struck by the solitude of his spacious halls and the image of desolation which it presented, Muhammad repeated two lines of the Persian poet Firdausi. The spider's web is the royal curtain in the palace of Caesar. The owl is the sentinel on the watchtower of Afrasiab. The quotation showed the well-read and elegant scholar and the subsequent deeds of the Sultan on that day exemplified the truth that intellectual eminence is no sure guarantee against the coexistence of the file's depravity. On leaving the palace, Muhammad repaired to a sumptuous banquet, which had been prepared for him in the vicinity. He there drank deeply of wine, and he ordered the chief of his eunuchs to bring to him a youngest child of the Grand Duke Notaras, a boy aged 14 years of age. Notaras during the siege had only displayed a quality of a factious bigot, but he now acted as became a Christian, a father and a man. He told the messenger that his child should never minister to the Sultan's brutality, and that he would rather see him under the executioner axe. Furious at hearing this reply, Muhammad ordered Notaras and his whole family to be seized and put to death. The general accuracy of Gibbon's splendid description of the taking of Constantinople is not impeached. In the minute diligence of Van Hammer or Finlay, so they supply us with some not unimportant connections and additions. I think that Mr. Finlay's vindication of the Genoese commander Giustiniani from the heavy censures of Gibbon is successful and have gladly followed it. The full meaning of this couplet, which reference to the customs of Eastern court of explained in, in a note of Turton's. Notaras meet his fate with dignity, and exhorted his children to die as fitted Christians. He saw their heads fall one by one before him, and then, after having asked a few moments for prayer, he gave himself up to the executioner, acknowledged him with him acknowledged acknowledging with his last breath the justice of God. The bloody heads were brought to Mohammed and placed by his order in a row before him on the banquet table. Many more executions of noble Christians followed on that day, to place the tyrant's savage mood, and it was said that the natural ferocity of Mohammed was goaded on by the malevolent suggestions of a French renegade whose daughter was in the Sultan's harem and was at that time the object of his passionate fondness.